In this video, I want to talk to you about the Putin Bears. And in case you don't know, this is a Russian hacker group. And this hacker group managed to break into the Bundestag in 2017. And now many people are probably thinking, well, Germany already has such poor, crumbling infrastructure, but the Bundestag is a whole different level. And what I found so shocking about this documentary was that the Bundestag itself admitted that the systems are outdated, are bad, that the infrastructure was poor, that the firewall was bad. In short, just bad IT overall. So how was it possible that Russian hacker groups were able to remain undetected in this network for months, or at least weeks, spying on people, installing malware, and of course also causing damage? Once again, it was the human factor, just like in many companies, in this case with a single secretary or perhaps several secretaries, who simply clicked on a corresponding link with an attachment. The whole thing happened more or less like this. The hacker group posed as the UN Council or as a member of the UN Council. And of course, at that time, this was very important. People took it very seriously. They believed the message, the email, and thought, okay, yes, this really is someone from the UN Council or from NATO. We click on this link and we trust it. And this link then quietly installed the spyware in the background almost unnoticed. Yes, no one noticed anything. And as I said, the hackers were able to operate in the background for weeks, even on Angela Merkel's laptop at the time, without anyone noticing. But eventually, it did come out, and luckily, the crucial summer break in politics came, which was used to bring this dilapidated infrastructure up to date. So it was really, yes, more than bad. The firewall was bad. Maybe there wasn't even any antivirus protection, I don't know. At that time, Windows Defender was actually already pretty good. But as I said, antivirus protection alone is not always enough. It's also really important to pay attention to which email attachments you open, which links you click on, and ultimately where those links actually lead. And once you've set the whole thing in motion, it's very difficult to stop the process. And believe me, these hacker groups are very sophisticated. It's not just a matter of thinking, oh, there's someone at the other end, they open the email, and yes, someone is naive and just opens the email, and then the whole thing happens. No, really, they're not called toxic bears, dangerous bears, cozy bears for nothing. I can't remember exactly what they're all called, but those three stuck with me. I think there was also a poisonous bear. And these 4 or 5 bears all have different intentions. They can even interact independently of each other. That means they want to gather information for the Russian state. They specifically intend to cripple the system, in this case to harm Germany, or they have the targeted goal of obtaining passwords, stealing passwords, or other data that might be valuable to them. And that's exactly what happened. They were active independently of each other and didn't even know it. And in this way, they were able to gain access to the Bundestag. Of course, it's not just the Bundestag that's involved here. These Russian hacker groups have, of course, also infiltrated other systems, including corporate systems. In this case, the state specifically deployed these hackers. I think it's also important to primarily distinguish what the intention is. In this case, it was actually less about money and more about sensitive information. But for companies, of course, data, documents, and information can also be very valuable. Of course, it always depends on the industry and the company. The larger a company is, the more valuable the customer data and the more attractive the company is to hackers. But that doesn't mean that if you're a small business, you're uninteresting, because there always has to be some reason for hackers to find it worthwhile to break into a company, to break in, however you want to call it. And most of the time, of course, the incentive is money. Back to the Putin Bears. So how could this even happen? These hackers are so well trained, you wouldn't believe it. That actually happened relatively easily. And it wasn't the secretary's fault, but rather the dilapidated infrastructure throughout Germany, not just in the Bundestag. This happens at all sorts of companies here, just recently again in Ludwigshafen or Ludwigsburg, where the entire city was paralyzed and hackers were able to shut down the whole power grid. A few months ago, the same thing happened in Switzerland, where an entire village was paralyzed, no electricity, no heating, completely cut off from the grid, and of course no internet. The fact is, these municipalities usually don't have the money to invest in infrastructure or IT. And especially with smaller companies, I know it's the same here in Germany, there's simply no money for an IT team, no money for truly professional antivirus protection, and above all, no money to properly train employees to explain what's important to know, what to watch out for when it comes to cybersecurity, how we can protect ourselves better, and how we can better protect our company. And those are basically the fundamental building blocks, so to speak, that you can take away from this documentary. Of course, as I said, this also affects politics. On the federal level, there are hackers who have attacked the Bundestag. But naturally, this could also happen in Great Britain or France, where these hackers target a specific country. I think there was even a case in Mallorca once. But as a rule, that's actually more the exception, I'd say. Much more often, it's the case that airports are attacked, companies are attacked because there's simply a more lucrative potential there. By more lucrative potential, I obviously mean money or customer data, which could theoretically be sold on the darknet. And how can you protect yourself against that? The most important thing, of course, is first of all to have this awareness, and that naturally comes down to knowledge. If you don't have this knowledge and have no idea about it, then you are, of course, more vulnerable. But if you inform yourself, if you read a blog or other blogs and watch these videos and generally continue to educate and train your employees in this area, then you are a big step ahead of other companies. Because then you know exactly, okay, we've already heard of this hacker group and we know how they operate, we know how they interact, and we can also to some extent assess whether this is actually a phishing email or a ransomware email. And then we can also take action. But what happens if something has already been introduced into the system? That brings me to the next point. If the hackers have already settled in, so to speak, how should you behave then? Or how should you behave? Just like Malibu and Pilz here in Germany, who were hacked and pulled all the plugs from the Wi-Fi, that's certainly one option. That was actually the case with the Bundestag as well, where all the plugs were pulled. And of course, from my point of view, that's the simplest option, to just completely shut everything down. The downside, however, is that you could lose data if you don't have a backup, and you could also potentially damage computers and the internet itself if you just pull the plug like that. Yes, of course, that's the best method to really shut everything down, but in my view, it's not necessarily the most sensible one, and it certainly doesn't resolve the damage by any means. Because once you've pulled the plug, you can assume that when you plug it back in or turn the switch back on, the hackers will still be active. And that's exactly how it was with these companies. And of course, that's also how it was with the Bundestag. So you had to proceed step by step, log into this network yourself, and basically kick out these hackers, gradually remove them. And that's exactly how it can be applied to a company network. You then, of course, have to hire an IT expert who can identify this Rains homeware virus. It could be various things. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Rains homeware, and then be able to eliminate the whole thing. You can assume that, as a rule, you won't be able to handle it yourself, especially since, unlike someone like me in a private setting, if someone gets a virus, you might just say, okay, I have a backup, I'll reinstall Windows and wipe everything else. That's not possible if you're a larger or medium-sized company with several laptops, and the entire network are already contaminated and infected. In that case, you really do need to bring in your IT team or someone from the IT department to find out what is actually visible on the laptop, what the hacker can see, where the hacker is hiding, what they can record, whether they can use the webcam or the microphone. It really is possible, and what their intention was or is. Does the hacker intend to disable the laptop, which would be the classic virus scenario, or is their goal simply to extract information? But the most common intention, especially for companies, is actually to encrypt the data. Since 2017, there have still been several thousand ransomware incidents reported, and the number has increased dramatically. Phishing emails have also increased, with a total of 5 billion circulating as of 2025. Yes, and in that case, it's naturally more difficult to interact, I would say, because you have to ask yourself, am I willing? Am I willing to take the risk of paying the ransom and getting my data back, or am I not willing? If not, it could very well be that the data is gone. And here again is a crucial building block for you as a company, as a business. Make a backup of everything you have in advance. Save it locally on USB sticks, on hard drives. This is also called a hybrid storage approach, meaning you use several options like external private clouds or clouds such as Google Drive and Microsoft. Drive, I'll make a video about that as well. Then nothing can really happen to you if you have the ransomware on there. The data is encrypted, the data is gone, and the laptops are encrypted. No problem, you just install a new Windows or a new operating system and you can restore your data. However, if you don't have the data backups, then that's obviously a problem, because the hackers can then blackmail you and say, okay, either you pay the ransom or your data is gone and you won't be able to access your laptop anymore. And many people then get unsettled and say the laptop is broken, it doesn't work anymore. Now you need 50 new laptops for 50 new employees. You can't start up your laptop anymore, all the hardware is damaged, and so on. This also has to do with the topic of knowledge, that many employees then think, oh God, now we have to write everything off, shut down the whole company. In most cases, it's actually just that ransomware aims to make the data unusable by encrypting it. Exactly, and the classic virus has actually become quite rare, at least for private individuals. In companies, it might still occur more often, but even there, not as much anymore. Most of the time, Trojans are more common, and their intention is actually to spy on company data and gain access to information. That's the more common variant. And of course, also to look for security vulnerabilities that can be exploited. So when I talk about the classic virus, I actually mean that someone downloads a file or something and then ends up with a worm on their laptop or computer. That was in the 80s and 90s. I actually experienced it myself. Someone installed it on my laptop, but it's not so common anymore, I'd say. What can still happen, though, is that someone from from external sources, shows up and plugs a USB stick into your laptop or computer, basically inserts it, and actually installs the malware. That can still happen, and it's still actually one of the common methods as long as the opportunity exists to pose as a friendly employee or a friendly supplier or whatever. That's just one example. It could also be a customer who plugs the USB stick into the laptop and then installs the virus or malware. Exactly. So if you know about this, and if you've maybe already heard of these different hacker groups or generally have some knowledge about it, then you're definitely better prepared than 80% of other business owners and can also take appropriate security precautions. And that's really all you can do in advance to protect yourself. That's actually the most important thing. Protect yourself in advance, not when it's already too late.